The world exploded around me in a second. They broke into my house with a spare key, as if it were their territory. I thought I had seen it all, but what happened next changed everything forever. No one expected what I saw when I returned to the house. The first time I realized I was invisible to my own family wasn't some big, dramatic moment. It was when I came home and found my sister Anna and her entire family had let themselves in. With a spare key. A key they had no right to have. They acted like it was their house, not mine. The kids tore through the living room like they owned the place, my parents sat awkwardly on the couch, and Anna just smiled like I was the weird one for standing there with bags in hand, stunned. Years of feeling like the background noise hit me all at once. Anna was always the golden child, the one with perfect grades, the new dorm, the endless cash. Me? I was the responsible one. The one who paid her own way, skipped meals, and got nothing but silence in return. I told my parents my plan before college: live at home, save money, work part-time. They looked at me like I'd announced I was moving to Mars. You need to contribute, Mom said, almost like it was a joke. $400 a month. For a broke student working a crappy bookstore job. Meanwhile, Anna was off at some out-of-state school with everything paid for. She called once to complain about the dorm's air conditioning. I drove a car with no AC because I couldn't afford to fix it. That night, watching her kids run wild in my house, I felt something inside me twist. I wasn't just angry. It was deeper. A dark, slow-burning fire that whispered maybe I was done being the good sister. Maybe it was time to make them see me. Not as the charity case or the invisible shadow, but as someone who could fight back. I was the one cleaning up after their mess, the one who found the spare key tossed behind the flower bed. The key that wasn't just metal, but a symbol, a sign that they never really wanted me here. The next day, I changed every lock, threw the spare key in the trash. If they wanted to treat me like a ghost, fine. I'd show them what ghosts do when they're pushed too far. I thought maybe things would get better. Maybe with time they'd see I wasn't just a walking wallet or a ghost to be ignored. But Christmas proved me wrong. For the first time in years, I bought presents early. Thought maybe, just maybe, I could be part of the family again. Then Mom opened the door and told me, "We don't want you here this year." Her voice was cold, final. From behind her, Jacob sneered, "This is no place for losers. You're starting to wear on all of us." I just stood there, holding the bags, feeling like the whole world shrank inside me. My parents looked everywhere but at me. Dad avoided my eyes. That night, sitting in my car, the phrase echoed louder than any carol, "No place for losers." I thought about all I'd done for Jacob, paying his mortgage, his kids' camp, school supplies, yet suddenly, I was the loser. The charity case. The one nobody wanted. Something inside me broke. Not the kind you see coming. The kind that festers quietly until you know you're done pretending. Done playing the family game. After that, I stopped answering calls. Stopped sending money. Stopped pretending that everything was fine. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was like standing in a room full of ghosts and wondering if any of them were really family. One night, alone in my apartment, I found myself staring at my phone, thinking about hiring a private investigator. Was I crazy? Was Anna hiding something? Was this all just in my head? The temptation to find out everything clawed at me. I wanted answers. I wanted justice. I wanted them to know that pushing me away would have consequences. Then the messages started. Threats, apologies, offers to make things right. I didn't respond. Not yet. I wasn't ready to let them back in. The real war was just beginning. Because if they thought they could erase me, break me, and move on, they were dead wrong. And then, one evening, I found a note slipped under my door. No name, no explanation. Just 4 words, "You don't know the half of it." My heart stopped. My hands shook. They were watching me. And whatever was coming next wasn't going to be easy. That note shook me more than I wanted to admit. I kept turning those words over in my head. You don't know the half of it. What the hell was waiting for me under the surface? Family secrets? Lies I hadn't guessed? I stared at the door for what felt like hours, heartbeat thrumming in my ears. I wanted to be scared, to run, but something darker was already taking root, curiosity. And something colder, revenge. It wasn't just that Anna and her family had barged in and treated my home like a hotel. It was the years before that, the slow poison they'd fed me by ignoring my existence. The whispered comparisons, the celebrations where my accomplishments were barely a footnote, the endless favors I did for them that vanished without thanks. The funny thing was, I'd always been the one to keep the peace. I swallowed my anger, paid their bills, babysat their kids, covered for their screw-ups. I was the family's invisible backbone, and they broke me like a twig. But now I realized they weren't just ignoring me, they were gaslighting me. My generosity was framed as laziness. My quiet struggle twisted into selfishness. And the second I stopped playing their game, I was a loser who didn't deserve to be invited to Christmas. I knew I couldn't just walk away and pretend it didn't hurt. That was the easy way out, and I wasn't about easy anymore. The first thing I did was dig into the past. Old texts, emails, bank statements, all the little favors, the money I sent to cover car repairs, summer camps, mortgage payments for Jacob's family. I wanted a record. Proof. Not for a court, but for myself. To remind me that I wasn't the problem here. Then I started paying attention. Quietly. Watching how my parents tiptoed around Jacob's screw-ups like he was a fragile prince. How Anna could drop by unannounced, with her kids in tow, and no one batted an eye. How I was expected to smile and nod. One night, after work, I sat in my car outside my parents' house. The lights were on, laughter spilling out. I saw Anna's kids playing in the yard, my parents watching with doting smiles. And me? I was the stranger. The outsider. I felt a familiar ache twist in my gut, but this time, it wasn't just pain. It was fuel. I decided to call an old friend, someone who owed me a favor. A private investigator. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to get him interested. I needed to know if there was more behind the smiles and fake pleasantries. Was there something darker under that perfect family facade? A week later, I got the first call. There were bank transfers from my parents to Anna's husband I'd never been told about. Loans forgiven without a word. And weirdly, emails between Anna and my parents discussing properties I'd never even heard of. I was stunned. The more I learned, the more it felt like I'd been kept in a cage while they ran a secret empire, one I wasn't allowed to touch. One night, the phone rang late. It was the investigator. His voice low. "There's something else. You might want to sit down for this." He told me about a hidden bank account, tens of thousands of dollars flowing quietly in and out. Money I contributed to, but no one talked about. Money that wasn't helping me. Or even Anna. It was for someone else. Someone nobody expected. That's when it hit me. The betrayal wasn't just about ignoring me. It was deeper. It was personal. I felt anger boil over. This wasn't just family drama. It was a war, and they'd been playing me like a pawn. I started planning. Not just to get back what was mine, but to make them see me. To make them pay for every time they'd made me invisible. But even as I plotted, part of me wondered, what was the cost? Could I become the monster they'd already made me feel like? I didn't have long to think. Because the night after that call, my car was keyed. Deep, angry scratches all down the driver's side. No note. No warning. Just a message. They were watching. Waiting. And the game was about to get a whole lot darker. The scratches on my car weren't just vandalism. They were a warning, a message from the family that thought they could scare me back into silence. But the scar that settled deep in my chest wasn't from the metal. It was from the realization they were desperate. Desperate enough to play dirty. And so was I. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shadow in the dark made me jump. I checked the locks twice, peeked out the windows, and kept my phone close, just in case the threats escalated. But the silence wasn't peace. It was the calm before the storm. The next morning, I found an envelope slid under my door. Inside, a single photo, Anna, standing in my apartment building's lobby, smiling like she owned the place. Along with a note, "We see you." I tore the note into pieces, shoved the photo in my pocket, and called the investigator again. "Is this a game to them?" I asked, voice tight. He sighed. "It's a war. And you just stepped onto the battlefield." I realized I wasn't dealing with just a cold family. This was something else. Something more dangerous. Days blurred into nights as I doubled down. I pored over every financial statement, text message, social media post. I learned about loans taken out in my name without permission. About a shell company Anna set up, a company that funneled money through my parents and back into her accounts. I felt sick, betrayed, and more alive than ever. One evening, I sat in a dark cafe, waiting for a contact who promised dirt on Anna's husband, Josh. He was the golden son-in-law, the perfect family man. Except, according to my source, his track record was anything but perfect. Job hopping, debts, secret side hustles that might cross legal lines. When my contact slid a folder across the table, I barely glanced at the incriminating documents. I was too deep now to care just about money or inheritance. This was about truth, justice, revenge. That night, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the times I'd been the invisible sister. The one whose hard work was never enough. The one pushed aside for the favorite. The one who'd paid their bills, cleaned their mess, and still been labeled a loser. And now, I was the storm. A week later, I confronted Anna at a family dinner they insisted I attend. The room was thick with fake smiles and forced pleasantries. But I wasn't playing along. I know about the accounts. The loans. The company you set up, I said, voice cold as ice. Anna's smile faltered. You're imagining things. I held up a printout. Don't lie. Not to me. The room went silent. My parents avoided my gaze. Josh's jaw clenched. Anna's face paled. Suddenly, the family facade cracked, and I realized something terrifying. I wasn't the only one hiding secrets. But before I could dig deeper, my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll lose more than money. My hand shook. They weren't bluffing. I had started a war, and there was no turning back. The threat wasn't some empty bluff. I felt it like a weight pressing down on my chest, subtle but relentless every glance over my shoulder, every time my phone buzzed and then went silent before I could answer. It was as if invisible eyes followed me, watching my every step, waiting for me to slip. I knew they were closing in, surrounding me with silent threats that didn't need words. But despite the creeping fear, I refused to back down. Not now. Not after everything I'd endured. Not after all those years of being ignored, belittled, and erased. The next morning, I found the mailbox stuffed with another envelope, this time thicker, heavier. Inside was a stack of photos, sharp and grainy, taken from angles that could only come from someone watching me closely, stalking my daily life like a predator. Pictures of my apartment building, the windows of my place at odd hours, even snapshots of me walking down the street. The cold realization hit me like a punch. They knew my routines better than I did. Every step I took had been mapped out. Every little habit logged. For a moment, my fingers shook. I thought about calling the police, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. This family had influence and connections deep enough to bury any complaints or investigations. The law wasn't going to protect me from a war being waged in the shadows of my own bloodline. But the real fight wasn't in court or the streets. It was inside me, inside the places where doubt and fear tried to take hold. That night, I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, wrestling with a storm of questions. Was it worth it? Was I risking everything, my sanity, my peace, maybe even my safety, for a family that had never truly wanted me? Was I throwing my life away on ghosts who thrived on control and silence? But then, I thought back to that flicker of panic in Anna's eyes when I had called her out on the financial lies and the secret accounts. That tiny crack in her perfect facade told me one thing clearly: they weren't untouchable. They were terrified. And they deserved to be. So I doubled down. I used their own twisted game against them. I sent anonymous tips to regulatory agencies about the suspicious shell company Anna had set up, the one that funneled money through my parents' names and back into her pockets. Quiet phone calls to Josh's old employers uncovered stories of his shady job history. I wasn't playing fair. This was no fair fight, but fairness was something my family had never extended to me. One afternoon, while walking near their house, I saw Anna's youngest kid alone and looking lost, eyes searching, anxious. Something broke inside me, a crack in the armor I'd built around my heart. I couldn't just be the angry sister anymore. I had to be something more. I sat with that kid in the park, bought ice cream, and listened as they hesitated, then spilled little secrets about the pressure they felt, the impossible expectations, the quiet fear of being not enough. It was a story I knew all too well. That night, as I lay in my dark apartment, I realized the family I had hated so much was not a cold, perfect machine. It was a house of mirrors, each reflection distorted by pain, neglect, and fear. And I was trapped in the middle, trying to find the way out. But no matter how broken it was, no matter how much I hurt, I vowed I would never be their victim again. Not this time. Just when I thought I might catch my breath, my phone buzzed again. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, fingers trembling as I opened the message. It was a photo I hadn't expected to see. A family portrait from years ago. Before the cracks and lies. Before the Cold Wars. There, in the center, was my father's smiling face, holding a small, worn-out box. Inside the box was an old, rusty key, the same shape as the one Anna's family had used to break into my home. The accompanying message read simply, "Not all keys unlock what you think." I dropped my phone onto the floor, my breath catching in my throat. What the hell did that mean? That photo, the key in my father's hand, and the cryptic message, "Not all keys unlock what you think," lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. For days, I turned those words over and over, trying to unravel their meaning. Was it a warning? A confession? A reminder that even the locks I changed, the doors I slammed shut, never really belonged to me? That someone else always held the master key, one that could open what I thought was sealed tight? I found myself slipping into restless nights. Sleep became a stranger. My thoughts spun wildly, each one circling back to my family, theirs and mine, and the tangled web of deceit I had stumbled into. What I had once believed was a broken family was actually something far more complex, something darker and more suffocating than I could have imagined. It wasn't just neglect or favoritism, it was calculated, ingrained. A house of mirrors reflecting every secret, every lie, every betrayal. One evening, while rummaging through a box of old belongings I'd been too afraid to touch, I found an old, weathered journal tucked away between forgotten memories. The faded leather cover bore my mother's handwriting. Curiosity overpowered my hesitation. With shaking hands, I opened it, unsure if I was ready for what I might find. Page after page revealed something I'd never seen before: my parents as flawed, frightened people. People who carried the burden of impossible expectations and unspoken regrets. In faded ink, my mother confessed to the guilt that weighed on her, how she and my father had, consciously or not, created a family built on uneven scales. How they had chosen to protect and nurture the golden children at a cost none of us fully understood. The journal spoke of a pact, whispered in shadowed corners, to favor one child over another to maintain some fragile illusion of success. I read those words and felt a tumult of emotions swirl inside me: rage, betrayal, but also an unexpected wave of sorrow. They had been prisoners, too. Trapped in a cycle of fear and control, forced to make choices that shattered us all. Even Anna and Jacob, with their polished lives and endless privileges, were caught in that same cage of expectation and sacrifice. The next morning, I confronted them. Not with screams or accusations, but with a quiet determination. I asked the questions I'd buried for years, demanding answers to the silence that had haunted my life. Their responses were shaky, defensive at times, but beneath it all, I glimpsed a raw, fragile remorse and acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, they had been blind to the cost of their choices. That they finally saw me, not the invisible burden, but the resilient person who had survived despite everything. Walking away from that conversation, I felt a strange lightness mingled with lingering scars. The past remained unchangeable, a series of locked doors and broken windows, but the future was mine to shape. I made a choice to stop waiting for the apologies that might never come, to stop searching for the love they withheld, and instead to build a life where I mattered. A life surrounded by people who saw me, who valued me without conditions or comparisons. For the first time in years, I realized the key to my freedom wasn't about unlocking a door or forcing open a path long barred. It was about deciding which doors to leave closed, doors tied to pain, to toxic love, to a family that never truly wanted me. Maybe the war with my family will never fully end. Maybe some wounds will never completely heal. But now, I fight for myself. And that fight, that fierce, unyielding fight, is what finally makes all the difference.